It didn't hurt, really, it didn't. It sounded worse than it felt. Well, so much has been said about peacemaking today. What else is there to say? Maybe we could just wrap it up. No, we have to talk about Monty Python. Do we have any Monty Python? Oh, we do. And you're even admitting it. Well, there's a scene in Monty Python's humor is either you like it or you don't. I don't know if there's any in between. I kind of like it. But it's an acquired taste, maybe you might say. Anyways, here's a scene from Monty Python's Life of Brian. Two characters hear Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and unfortunately, they're too far back in the crowd to hear it properly. And so when Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," Jeff's laughing because he knows, they mishear it as, "Blessed are the cheesemakers." And somebody asks, well, what's so special about cheesemakers? And a nearby man explains, well, obviously it's not meant to be taken literally. It refers to any manufacturer of dairy products. And at the same time, two people start arguing with each other. And Brian says, lay off them. And the irony of the scene is right there, in that Brian, by trying to calm the argument, is displaying the qualities of a peacemaker. And although we may not mishear Jesus pronouncing a blessing upon cheesemakers, I'm not sure even today we clearly hear what Jesus is saying in this beatitude. Jesus does not say, blessed are those who have peace. Jesus does not say, blessed are those who prefer peace, wish for peace, wait for peace, or love peace, or praise peace, however fond we may be of peace. Jesus is saying something far bigger, and in truth, something far more unsettling. He is calling us to a difficult, heroic way of life. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the doers of peace. Blessed are those who make peace. We think that we're blessed when we enjoy peace, but Jesus is saying something very different here. He's saying we're blessed when we make peace. To understand him, to hear Jesus clearly, we need to begin with the key word here, and that's the word peace. And the backdrop, in the background of Jesus' blessing on peacemakers, is the Hebrew word shalom. Shalom is even used this day in the Middle East by both Jews and Arabs. It's a greeting and a farewell. It's hello and goodbye. It's good to see you and see you later. You greet a friend by wishing him shalom, and you send a person on their way with good wishes of peace. When we speak of peace, most of the time what we have in mind is the absence of strife, the absence of war. Peace is not a quality in itself. It's freedom from something, freedom from some negative state. But the Hebrew word speaks to not a negative definition of peace. The Hebrew word is a positive definition. Shalom encompasses everything which makes for a person's highest good. It goes all the way back to those opening chapters of the Bible in the book of Genesis, where the peace of God, the shalom of God, is depicted in that creation account. In the beginning, humanity is blessed with wholeness, with flourishing, with delight. There is this rich state of affairs where all the needs are satisfied and the gifts are fruitfully employed. In other words, shalom is the way things ought to be. And this Old Testament vision of shalom, of peace, is about the well-being of God's people, of all of God's people, from the richest to the poorest, from the most agile to the lame, to those who are brilliant to those who are slow of mind. Shalom peace is deeper. It's richer. It's life-giving. It lets people be free to be the people of God, to be the people that God made us to be, participating, interacting, not fearful, but joyful, not walking on eggshells, but dancing in the streets. But there's more in the Old Testament than just that. In the Old Testament, shalom is a parallel term to the word justice. And so in the Old Testament, peace is more than tranquility and order. It's also that deep commitment to the work of justice. Blessed are the peacemakers. Shalom is about justice. It's about living out the truth of God's kingdom. The peacemakers whom Jesus pronounces as blessed in Matthew 5:9 are agents of God who are actively establishing shalom. Or as one commentator puts it, they are those who work for the wholeness, the well-being that God wills for a broken world. The peacemaker is someone who is reconciled to God. The peacemaker is someone who knows that God is for peace and seeks reconciliation instead of strife and war. And this beatitude turns its focus on those who, instead of seeking justice through violence, seek justice through reconciliation. The peacemaker seeks to reconcile, not by pretending there's no differences, not by suppressing differences, but by creating love of the other that transcends differences, that permits people to join hands in spite of differences. Do you think there's a need for peacemakers in our day and age that can transcend differences, that can extend hands to people in spite of differences? Peacemaking. How about this definition? The active entrance into the middle of warring parties for the purpose of creating reconciliation and peace. Blessed are those who enter into the middle of warring parties to seek reconciliation and peace. Well, this beatitude's getting a little harder, isn't it? Perhaps the best examples of peacemakers are found in the rest of Matthew's gospel, in the words of Jesus. Later on in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about how those who are peacemakers leave a gift at the altar to seek reconciliation with their fellow followers of Jesus. Peacemakers are those who forgive those who sin against them and respond to a sinful sister or brother in Christ in the way that's described by Jesus in Matthew 18. And it includes, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, those who are merciful. That beatitude leads into this. Merciful with forgiveness, because God has been merciful to them in forgiveness. There's a broader paradigm that identifies peacemakers as those who seek reconciliation, not just with people they know, but with the world at large. And so Jesus talks about peacemakers as people who come to terms quickly with their accusers, especially peacemakers are especially those who love their enemies and pray for their persecutors. In fact, Jesus describes those who love their enemies and pray for their persecutors. Have you ever picked this up? He describes them as children of the Father in heaven. And that's the phrase that he uses in this beatitude for those who are peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they are the children of God. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. You're children of your Father in heaven. The term that's translated sons, children, here was used in the Jewish world to connect a person with an attribute or another person. And so as peacemakers, people are called sons of God. The older translation is children of God, because the work that they're engaged in is similar to God's work. just as people are identified as members of Jesus' family when they do God's will. Let's address the elephant in the room here. There's some Christians that take this beatitude seriously. I hope we all do. And so the question arises about whether Jesus teaches pacifism, or at least non-violent resistance. And some of you have history, backgrounds in your family of people who in wartime have been active pacifists. Some of you may have in your background or history, I don't know everyone here, military backgrounds, people who went to war. My father went to war. Not that he would identify as a Christian. But historically, participation in war, this is interesting, was certainly frowned upon by early Christians. We can see that in the historical records. It was not the way of Jesus. Pacifists are sometimes accused of being utopian, of being unrealistic. But the question for the pacifist, and actually I think this is a question for a lot of things that as Christians we advocate for. The question is not for us or for pacifists, does it work in the world? There are all sorts of things that Jesus says that we would say, well, that doesn't work in the world. That's not the question. The question for the pacifist is, and for us in all sorts of other areas, what does it mean to follow Jesus in this concrete situation? Other Christians read these words of Jesus and they say, well, these words are about interpersonal relationships, not international relationships. In other words, Christians, we shouldn't use violence in our personal life, but we can participate in international or military violence. But here's the struggle here that you need to resolve. What applies to each of us as a follower individually as Jesus needs also to apply to anything that we participate in if we are to be consistent following Jesus. Now, I know we try to do this all the time. We're here on Sunday nodding our heads and saying, yes, 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 that's exactly right. That's what we shouldn't do. And I'm not just talking about what we're focusing on this morning. And then we go out the doors and we do everything that we've just said amen that we shouldn't be doing. We have a dichotomy sometimes in our lives. But privatizing your kingdom ethics is not the way of Jesus. Regardless of your posture towards the state, towards the military, or other countries, the goal, keep this in mind, the goal of the follower of Jesus is peace. Now, maybe for you the means isn't clear, but let's say this. While we all need to desire peace, how we get there may differ. But peace is not passive. And as peacemakers, we need to be comfortable with conflict. Comfortable with conflict. Is that an oxymoron? Comfortable with conflict. Committed to bringing righteousness to bear, regardless of how difficult the situation might become. The truth is, there is nothing peaceful about making peace. It's hard work, and that's why we usually choose the easy route. But God has called us to do more than enjoy his peace, to experience peace. He wants us to be agents of peace. Maybe for most of us, the place to start is not on the grand international stage. Maybe the place for most of us to start is by bringing peace to some of our strained and broken relationships. Some of us have people in our lives that we are bitter towards, resentful, or embittered towards. Others of us maybe have moved past those negative feelings and we're just numb and we're just distant towards people who've hurt us. But we're not peacemakers if we live in open hostility or quiet animosity towards others. To put it directly, we do not resemble the Father whose children we claim to be. We need to do the difficult thing and work peace into those strained and distant relationships. Jesus, the Prince of Peace, Son of God, calls those who work for peace his children, his brothers and sisters were children of God, were Jesus' siblings. Those who stand in a divided world, pointing the way to unity. Those who live in a hateful world, demonstrating the way of love. Those who share with Jesus the ministry of reconciliation. Those are the people most closely related to him. In a world that is full of all sorts of aggression, Jesus' reminder that peacemakers have God's approval is something we need to grasp. Peacemakers will be recognized as authentic members of God's family. And ultimately, one day, shalom, God's peace, will finally dawn on earth.